I'm not that familiar with Teams either.
Yeah. Ruby,
but I did not use my last name, so I don't know that.
Okay. So Ruby has started recording this, so we'll have a recording. And Ruby, would you please send a link to the recording after the meeting to at least the participants, and then they can forward it to everyone else. Let's get started then, even if others are joining us. I'm Lloyd Schmeidler. I'm a Senior Community Development Analyst here at Community Development, and we'll get started. Let's do a quick round of introductions. Ruby, you've heard, is a community development analyst as well in our department. Recently got a promotion and is doing teaching work. We're hiring a project coordinator to support our team, and hopefully that will be in place. So I'm glad to have Ruby continuing to provide some ongoing support. I'm going to call on people. My pronouns are he, him. And let's go around, starting with Casey, introducing yourselves, your position, preferred pronouns, and we'll take it from there. Go ahead, Casey.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Casey Buchanan. I respond to they, them, theirs pronouns, and I'm the Director of Housing and Therapy Services at the LGBTQ Center of Durham and the co-director of Project FAM. Very happy to be having this training as we're embarking on this new rapid rehousing project for us anyway. We've been doing housing work since 2019, but we've always kind of been just on the outskirts of COC projects, and we're excited for this new adventure. So happy to have our team here today.
Very good. And then E.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is E. I also use they, them pronouns, and I am the Survivor Services Specialist under Project FAM.
All right, Anne, please.
Hi, I'm Ann Tropiano with Families Moving Forward. I'm the Director of Residential and Support Services, and we are too brand new to rapid rehousing and excited to be here and to walk through this process with all of you. And she, her pronouns.
Tammy?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tammy Lawrence. My pronouns are she, her. I am the very new executive director at Families Moving Forward, and we have not done rapid rehousing. So we are just on the brink of starting a rapid rehousing program and are a little nervous. So.
All right. Very good. Well, glad to have you all with us. I do not have a PowerPoint prepared for our presentation. I do have an outline of things that I want to talk about in this first session. So we have already learned from Hanalea that she will be working with everyone to schedule a separate training for coordinated entry and the by name list processes. We are also going to set up a separate training for dealing with rent reasonableness and families moving forward. Excuse me, I've got an FMR here rather than FMF, but fair market rents. And Colin, I think, is going to be leading that, our manager of the homeless team. See, Gemini, you recently joined us. Would you also introduce yourself? We just finished a round of introductions. Could introduce yourself, name, position at the LGBTQ Center, preferred pronouns, please.
Good morning, y'all. My name is Gemini, also goes Jim. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the senior case manager with Project FAM, the LGBTQ Center there.
All right, very good. Thank you. And we have Tammy and Ann with us. Jim from Families Moving Forward. They are getting a new contract. They're also applying for the best domestic violence bonus. That's the plan right now in the 2022 COC competition with Families Moving Forward. Okay, let me start by asking people to chime in with your questions about rapid rehousing. What are things that over the next several weeks as you prepare to start rapid rehousing, what are things you want to know?
Lloyd, I'm going to ask if you could maybe start by talking through what rapid rehousing is. And then maybe since we have our frontline staff here, if you could talk through what the rapid rehousing process, intake process, and ongoing process looks like from start to finish for them. I have given them access to the case management onboarding tools through HUD Exchange and those things, but I think we came to this meeting hoping to also have that conversation of kind of talking through the basics and talking through what it looks like start to finish to be a case manager on this project.
Okay.
And for me, I wonder, what's the best program manual or guidance tool? Because I know, or in my experience as, at Families Moving Forward, working with primarily Housing for New Hope's rapid rehousing program, there are certain things that rapid rehousing monies can be spent on and some that can't, and, that kind of flow. So, what's my best resource, or what are the best resources? Casey just mentioned the HUD Exchange, but is there rapid rehousing? This is the program manual. This is the guidance from HUD or the state ESG.
Very good. All right. Thank you. Other questions that you have as you come to the virtual meeting this morning? All right, we'll start then. Let's see, how do I want to do this? I'll share my screen periodically, I think, throughout our time. We'll get as far as we can in the next 80 minutes or so, and pick up additional things as we need to. So obviously a great place to start is what rapid rehousing is. And essentially, there's three basic components of rapid rehousing. First is housing navigation, helping households identify a permanent housing resource, right? It can start as soon as people are identified as homeless or come into like a shelter environment. A case manager would start looking to help them figure out, okay, what's your housing plan? What would you like to have in your next permanent housing? And how can we figure out how to identify that housing? And so that is a big piece, right? We know that across the board in Durham and in many communities, finding units is a real challenge for people. We are in the midst, I think, of developing a contract for increased landlord engagement in Durham. And both Families Moving Forward and the LGBTQ Center may already have connections with private landlords who are renting to some of your clients, or you are aware perhaps through your own contacts of people who would likely be willing to rent to people coming out of homelessness. And so that is a big piece. And really one of the key components we like to talk about is that rapid rehousing projects really need to develop a partnership with three parties. the tenant, obviously, the household that is experiencing homelessness and want to get them moved back into housing as rapidly as we can. That's why we talk about rapid rehousing. And secondly, the landlord, the ordinarily a private landlord who has perhaps some market rate units, but also is willing to accept some kind of short-term partial subsidy for a household that is moving out of homelessness. And then the case manager of the particular funded project, whether it is a continuum of care funded project or an EST funded project or a project funded by the city of Durham, right? Or perhaps, a private, foundation, maybe along the way to the organizations might also get some funding from private supporters to help support households moving back into housing. So it's really important that housing navigation piece, I think, really work to set up partnerships so that there's strong communication between the tenant and the landlord, and the case manager is kept in the loop. There's are indications in much of the literature that I think actually one of the standards is that when a landlord is preparing to have a formal communication, for example, with the tenant around a problem that the landlord has, that information is shared with the case manager as well. So that many times the case manager is kind of mediating that relationship between the landlord and the tenant, or helping facilitate good communications, right? Between the landlord and the tenant. We know that in the landlord-tenant relationship, there's significant differences of power, right? The landlord has a unit that he or she needs to at least pay the bills on and hopefully make some additional monies on to support him or herself again, or stockholders or whatever. And so their situation is not as precarious as the tenant. Ordinarily, they're stably housed. They're financially secure in one way or another. Although some smaller landlords with renting, perhaps somebody owns a fourplex. My light keeps going off if I don't move around in my office here. So, but they have a lot of power, and it's obviously much more traumatic for the tenant if they get evicted than it is for the landlord to evict somebody. And so the tenant has a lot of stress many times. We know that we talk about trauma-informed care and just experiences of homelessness are traumatic for people. I don't know if you think about your own experiences of moving willingly, and hopefully it's only been willingly on your part that over the course of your life, but there's a lot of stress associated with moving. I remember well, moving to Durham back in 1999, 23 years ago now, and after that experience of moving here from Colorado, packing up my wife and my belongings in a U-Haul truck and spending 5 days crossing the country from Colorado to Durham, and our U-Haul truck breaking down within the first 100 miles of the trip and needing to spend a few extra days. But that experience was something I didn't want to experience again for at least several years, right? And so it's good for us, I think, to reflect on our own experiences of relocation, to be in touch with kind of the trauma of people experiencing homelessness. So housing navigation is a real key in helping people, identify units that they choose. So Generally, projects are encouraged to help people identify at least 3 units that they can choose from. I think Housing for New Hope kind of says to people, okay, we're going to work with you to show you 3 possible units that meet rent reasonableness and fair market rent standards. If none of them kind of fit your needs, or you're not happy with either of them, any of them, then you can spend, perhaps a few more weeks focusing on trying to find other units. We're, as a COC, I think, continuing to try to identify more landlords in the community. Durham overall has, according to the statistics, probably about 55,000 to 60,000 rental units. Our housing in Durham County is roughly evenly divided between units owned by the occupants and rental units. And so with an average vacancy rate of perhaps, depending on a particular month, you're looking at perhaps 3%. That still suggests there's, 1,500 to 2,500 or more rental units in Durham that are vacant at any given time. So part of the challenge of our projects, Rapid Rehousing, is to make connections between the vacancies, right, and the landlords that have vacancies and the people that need housing. And obviously, getting them willing to rent on it is a challenge. So housing navigation is a real key component.
Excuse me, Lloyd. I'm
Yes.
sorry. Are you okay if we ask questions during?
Absolutely, yep.
Okay.
Otherwise-
So I think I heard you say that the COC is also working to identify units. And I know I've been in by name list meetings where it's actually been said, we're going to try and give this unit to this person. Their name came up. Would that be a possibility for our rapid rehousing programs? Right.
I think that is a key question to figure out how work with Hanalea on that question, and the landlord navigation contract. Let me see, I've got it emailed here somewhere. Here's a list of contracts we're developing. All right, we are developing a contract with Housing for New Hope to provide landlord engagement services, help recruit landlords to work with households exiting homelessness. My understanding is that, and that contract should be starting, I think, an effective date of July 1. My understanding is that that work, so it's through Housing for New Hope, is going to be for the entire COC. And so we're going to need to obviously work to ensure, because we all know that we need more landlords at the table, right? We need to make more connections to those units. So hopefully it will be more open, but one of the keys also around rapid rehousing is this idea that it is the tenant choice, right? None of us want to be told, I mean, as adults, that this is where you need to go, so within limits, case managers need to work with clients to say, well, these are some potential units. If these, if your household needs a 2-bedroom, we show you several 2-bedrooms and you're not completely satisfied with any of them, that's fine. Then, can we take another week or two to find, to allow you to do some additional research on your own, and maybe you can find another landlord whom we're not aware of that is willing to rent to you. All right.
Hey, Lloyd, I have a question that kind of goes along with what you've been saying, but I want to make sure, Anne, did you feel like you got the answer you were seeking? Okay.
All right.
So with that in mind, Lloyd, I know that in our application we had to designate a specific number of units at a specific market rate. So can you talk about how that works from a billing standpoint, and when we're making decisions, are we held to those rates that were in our application, or how does that work?
Yeah, Colin is going to do a whole session on issues of rent reasonableness and fair market rents. Essentially, both, well, all of our publicly subsidized housing units, whether you're talking about housing choice voucher through the housing authority or COC funded housing, needs to be under rent reasonableness and fair market rent standards. And Colin is going to do a training around that so that, you know, we are not able to rent units above rent reasonableness and fair market rents, even if the household has a wealthy relative or friend who is willing to pick up the difference between what the public subsidy for that unit is and what the landlord is asking. I'm not sure that addresses your question, Casey, but
Yeah. So when
okay.
is Colin going to be doing that training?
Probably by the end of June. I think we're
Okay.
gonna work to get that scheduled. He may pop on the call later this morning.
Okay.
Obviously, that is a real key, is how to establish that. And there are some tools. We do have some guidance on that. Okay. So
Awesome.
okay. So financial assistance, rapid rehousing projects are able to provide a variety of financial assistance. Primary, this is kind of the second core component. The financial assistance is primarily rent assistance and utility, sometimes, and utility assistance, depending on the needs of the household. Projects need to establish written guidance as to how much assistance they are going to provide. Obviously, you want to have an equitable program. I think the regulations, and this is a challenge with working with landlords, is that financial assistance in rapid rehousing projects should only be committing 3 months of rent assistance at a time to the household. But the overall total of rent assistance provided can be up to 24 months in a 3-year or 36-month period. Okay. So why do we have a rule around only 3 months at a time? Any ideas why we would say only 3 months at a time?
I would hope because families' financial situations may improve and so they can afford more of that rent. So the assessments are necessary on a regular basis to determine need.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right? This is not a permanent housing subsidy. Ordinarily, what permanent housing subsidies are ordinarily provided through public housing or through a housing choice voucher or through the continuum of care. We do have some permanent housing subsidies in projects called permanent supportive housing. A rapid rehousing project is intended to be short to medium term, 3 months to 24 months of financial assistance to help people bridge from a period of homelessness to a period, hopefully, of self-sufficiency. And what a lot of studies have shown over the last 20 or longer years is that most households only need short-term subsidies, right? And even in Durham, our rapid rehousing households that are coming through our rapid rehousing programs, and we've been operating rapid rehousing programs for over 10 years in Durham, returns to homelessness are generally 10 to 15, maybe 20%, depending on the particular time period you're talking about, of the households that have received assistance. All right. And so part of the work of the case manager is to develop a plan with the household, with the adults, the parents, to really, on a consistent basis, look at what is your self-sufficiency plan? What are your goals for moving towards self-sufficiency? What are you planning to do over the next weeks and months to move towards greater self-sufficiency? And how can I, as a case manager, support you in that work? Right? Very important. Anne, you had a question?
I do. So
Okay.
let's say the first assessment was done and it said, yep, 3 months. And then the second review was done and maybe there isn't any financial assistance needed. But sometimes we know that crises happen after that. Are there penalties or best practices about having a person enrolled in the project but maybe not receive financial assistance, but continue to receive that case management support? Like, can case management support be provided? I guess the question is for how long for any one household, and could it be that there's a gap in a period where financial assistance is or isn't provided, but then it might be needed at a greater level or a lesser level down the road? So I know that's a lot of questions.
Yep. No, you're right on. You're right on. You guys are you've been around the block a time or two. So that's absolutely true. And I know households can be provided a minimum of 6 months of continuing case management after financial assistance has ended. And they can, and it's one of the things in our whole homeless diversion and our work to help people maintain housing stability, is that if a household has received rapid rehousing assistance and has perhaps again had a situation where they were terminated from a program, if they encounter a new difficulty, they can be put back on the kind of rapid rehousing project without having to have a new episode of homelessness, right? We can reconnect them. We are trying to really, again, it's short to medium term, up to 24 months within a 3-year period. So you can well imagine a scenario where a household has been doing well for maybe 9 months, and maybe during that 9-month period they got, say, 6 months of financial assistance, and then after 3 more months they said, "Why we're really stable, some good things have happened," and so they're exited from the rapid rehousing project, and then lo and behold, 6 months later, maybe somebody becomes sick, maybe somebody loses a job, there's some kind of situation where all of a sudden they need more help. Well, let's not put them back into homelessness, but let's reconnect them through the rapid rehousing project and continue to provide the rapid rehousing support. That is certainly possible. And it should be the kind of work we do as a system.
Okay, and so we would actually exit in that situation a household from the rapid rehousing project and then re-enter them. Is there a best practice related or an expectation, an outcome that we would want to discharge that family or exit them from the project rather than continue to have them enrolled for the 24 months, for instance, or the duration of our contract?
That's a great question. I think the challenge for administrators and for case managers is always trying to find the balance. between efficiency and effectiveness, right? And this is something that I think households receiving assistance need, in my view, others may disagree, I think households need to be brought into the conversation, need to have an understanding that, listen, the Durham community does not have the resources to provide you or anybody more financial assistance than you need to become housing stable. Okay? So we want to use the minimum amount of resources necessary to help you achieve housing stability so that we can help the next household who also has needs, right? And it is important for case managers to understand, and this can be difficult for social workers because we like to help people, which is good. I like to help people. It's important to distinguish between helping end people's homelessness and helping end their poverty. The work of case management in rapid rehousing projects, and that kind of leads into the third core component, which is perhaps the most important one, and that is effective case management, and that the case management needs to be really focused on not helping people end their poverty as much as helping people end their homelessness. So the focus of the case management work is really around what's the housing plan for this household, how are we going to implement that housing plan, and then once we get the household back into permanent housing, what do we need to do over a period of several months through case management to help this household achieve housing stability? What are the kind of connections we need to make to other community resources, right? Whether it's formal resources like, a connection to a physician or to mental health services or to perhaps a lawyer or, depending again, what are the particular needs of the household, as well as what are the community connections, right? A good case manager is going to work with that household to connect them to their neighbors, to maybe, at least connect them to their neighbors on either side of them, particularly if they're in an apartment complex, maybe working with the property manager of the apartment complex to introduce the tenant to people on their same floor or, just a few of the people. They don't need to be obviously introduced as a rapid rehousing client necessarily, but just help make community connections, other community connections around if they're a person of faith, or is there a religious congregation in the area that they would like to get connected to? Can the case manager help facilitate that? The Durham Parks and Rec department has all kinds of recreational programs at many times at free or very reasonable cost at local community recreation centers, right? Making sure that the households are aware of where those resources can be accessed. Why is that important? Well, because many times through the experience of homelessness, the household has lost those community connections. And many times, if they're, renting, it's in a new neighborhood. And so part of the work of the case manager is around helping them become connected in that neighborhood, helping them figure out, okay, what are the bus lines, or what are the, how are we going to manage transportation, right? Whether it's using public transportation or, who's if they do own a car, many times people that in coming out of homelessness that do own a car. Their car needs frequent maintenance, right? Needs repairs. Who are reliable, people who can be trusted to provide good auto repair work. Those kind of things are very important in helping this household really become stable in housing. That makes sense? So that's the work of case management. Case management is not so much about, again, helping end their poverty. Long term, yeah, you can talk to them about, are there opportunities for more skill development if they're interested in, Durham Tech is a great resource. But a lot of times, households coming through a period of homelessness are not ready to engage with programs at Durham Tech because they're still focused on the trauma of dealing with homelessness. And they really can't focus on, being successfully engaging with an adult education program until they have some housing stability, right? Natalie, I see you kind of shaking your head. What are your thoughts?
No, sorry. While we're in this meeting, I'm having to deal with some work stuff, so that was not in response to y'all at all.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. That's fine. Appreciate that. So the third component is really case management. So you've got the core components of housing navigation, and housing navigation, depending on the household, they may move once or twice during a period of rapid rehousing, right? The first landlord may not work out, and they for whatever reason, you may need to work with them multiple times to find housing navigation. And then the financial assistance, again, working with them in an ongoing way as to how much financial assistance is needed for rent, for utilities, perhaps for other eligible expenses, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And then the ongoing case management, which is really the core of developing that trusting relationship with the tenants, with the participants, the adults, to help them effectively move towards housing stability. Okay.
And I have a question.
Yes.
In terms of forms for clients, so like intake through to case management, are there templates that we should be using for that? Are we expected to create our own and or use a new what we already use in our programs? How does that work?
Yeah, there are a lot of resources. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. I'm gonna share some of those with you. We're about halfway through our 90-minute session here. Let me. So, are we clear on the three basic components? Right. Those are really key, and I think case managers again really need to understand that these are the components they really need to focus on. Okay.
Lloyd, I see E has a question.
Okay, E, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, y'all. I was trying to find like a thumbs up reaction and I accidentally clicked the button. I was just trying to say, I got you. I'm following along.
All right, very good. Thanks so much. All right, so I'm going to try to share my screen here and see if there's a few things I can. Let's see, where do I want to start? I want to, first of all, let me share some resources. Kind of refers to Anne's question, particularly around best program manual, but it also connects to what fuller discussion of what rapid rehousing is. And essentially, if you go to endhomelessness.org, if you've not already been there, the National Alliance to End Homelessness has a great rapid rehousing toolkit. It's just been recently updated to reflect current best practices. It is 50 plus pages, but you can see housing identification, housing navigation, the first key piece, rent and move-in assistance, longer, can you see my screen? And you can see my screen? Yes?
Yes, sorry.
Yep, I
All
see
right.
it.
All right,
Yep.
so it was just again updated here in 2022. So this can be a great resource to go more in depth in some of these ideas that we've talked about. Again, we talked some about flexible financial assistance here, 2.3, dealing with household needs and costs, and also structuring financial assistance, how that works, and then your various policies and procedures, etc. So this is a great resource, and I've referred to it in some of my comments earlier, but feel free to download this. It's can be a real valuable resource for you. Okay, endhomelessness.org, and then search for Rapid Rehousing Toolkit, and you can easily find it. Okay. And on this page, simply download the toolkit, and it was updated in March of this year, so that's pretty current. Providers can use this toolkit to design any new rapid rehousing program or to improve their current practice. So, like, it's right on time for both organizations. Okay. These other toolkits, companion here to the rapid rehousing performance benchmarks and program standards, and the performance evaluation and improvement toolkit. There's still some people perhaps who are not convinced that rapid rehousing works, but the research really suggests that it does. Works very effectively. One of the to talk a little bit in general about homelessness, and we're doing some good things in Durham and nationally. It's easy for those of us who are working and have worked in this field for some time to get our thinking a bit skewed around why people experience homelessness and how long people experience homelessness for. A lot of the data has shown that there is a significant group of people, and our homeless diversion work in Durham is bearing this out, is that there's a group of people that need very limited assistance. And so we talk about homeless diversion, right? And this is diversion that simply helping people connect to providing a very limited assistance to help keep them out of the emergency shelter entirely. Why do we want to do that? Well, again, the data shows that the longer people experience homelessness, the more difficult it is for them to get out of homelessness, and the more difficult it is for them to maintain housing stability. So if we can keep people housed, even if they're doubled up, even if they're couch surfing, and they would maybe meet the Department of Education definition of being homeless. If they're not in shelter, that can still be a better situation for the household than being in the emergency shelter. As wonderful as families moving forward and urban ministries and our other shelters are and are trying to be, still, if we can keep households out of those experiences and those environments, it is better for them. Then even when people come into shelter, there's a significant group of people that over a period of a week or two or three are going to self-resolve. I don't know if Tammy or Ann or anybody else on the call, if you have any experiences of households that, figured something out after they were in shelter for a while, right? Maybe it doesn't happen as often as it used to because we're doing more homeless diversion than we used to, and we're not, having people come into the shelter. But there are people that, come into shelter and leave, and the shelter never sees them again. And they have one episode of homelessness, and then things work out. Right? What challenges the mindset of many social workers and case managers and others working with people experiencing homelessness is that we tend to work most intensely with people who have longer episodes of homelessness, which is not surprising. That they tend to be the people we work with, but then we often think that, well, because I'm working with John and Susie and Fred and Linda for extended periods of time, everybody who's coming through the shelter is going to be like Fred and Linda and John and Susie. But that's not the reality. That's part of the challenge, right, of case management, right? Is really working with people as individuals. And we have often kind of generalized from the hardest to serve people to a situation where we're saying, well, everybody is hard to serve. No, everybody isn't. Some people are. Some people need more intensive supports, but the percentage of people that coming through homelessness that need permanent supportive housing is a small portion of the people that are experiencing homelessness. Anyway, I digress. But I do want to mention that the other resource that I want to mention at this time, if I can get to it, is our friends over in Raleigh have some wonderful resources available online, and the main address is simply partnershipwake.org. Not even www, just partnershipwake.org. And under what we do, hopefully you still can see my screen, under education and training, there's publicly accessible information in what's called their partnership library. And a couple of things I will mention to you on this page. Under supportive housing, the YouTube playlist has 3 trainings. These have been provided by experts in training. Rapid Rehousing Training Series 3, 3 videos totaling about 4 hours of training together. So much more in depth than we are going into here. But again, for your case managers, it could be really valuable to access these resources. And then as well, under education and training, in the same partnership library, last year's 2021 Homelessness Academy. I want to mention prevention, diversion, rapid resolution. Rapid resolution connects to the idea of rapid rehousing, right? And then the other two pieces or two videos in particular, housing-based case management, part 1 and part 2. Again, about this is about 4.5 hours. So there's significant training opportunities there, and these are provided by Ord Code, which is an internationally recognized company and organization trying to help communities throughout North America and in the English-speaking world of Australia and the United Kingdom really work on homelessness. So I think really refer you to their housing-based case management 1 and 2 in particular for additional training, and certainly if case managers need more support for ideas around motivational interviewing and assertive engagement and trauma-informed care, those can also be great resources to take advantage of. All right. Those of you who are at Families Moving Forward also may want to encourage your people working directly with people in shelter to explore housing-focused sheltering part 1 and 2, because your rapid rehousing projects really are coming out of a housing-focused shelter environment. And so your case managers in working specifically with people in the shelter should be laying the groundwork for the rapid rehousing project. So those are some resources and best practices that I really want to refer you to. All right. I want to also, coming back to some of the questions that Casey had, I'll be sending many of you I'm going to send you this document, not because it is something that necessarily you will be using for a COC funded project. Probably going to use something similar for the City of Durham's contract that you'll have with families moving forward, that the city will have with families moving forward. But because in terms of intakes and admissions and what are the key documents that you'll want to maintain in client files, this is a pretty good comprehensive list. Okay. So I wouldn't be concerned about information on here about submitting this with an invoice, unless the particular project manager that you're working with a city contract manager or project manager discusses with you. But let's come down the list. All of your projects are going to use your HMIS project entry, right? So you'll have the date there. You can put in the client's HMIS ID, which I think ordinarily you're going to have. And then place a copy of this sheet on top of each new household's client file, right? This is an important thing, and sadly, but the reality is with public assistance, with government funding, we do need to maintain a lot of records, because we have a responsibility to the public, to the taxpayers, to make sure that public funds are spent on legitimate costs and that the people who are receiving the assistance qualify for that assistance. So for example, we need to verify people's homelessness, literal homelessness, right? So that's really key. The start date of the lease, identification for all household members should be obtained and put into the hard copy file, and birth certificates if those are available. Verification of disability, we recently added this to the list of client documents, particularly because if clients are needing to be perhaps after a period of rapid rehousing assistance, if they need permanent supportive housing through the COC or perhaps somewhere else, if we can verify their disability, it's easier to, it can expedite that process to move people to permanent supportive housing if we have verification of disability already in hand. Ann, did you have a question?
So I did, going back to verification of homelessness, if a household is in an emergency shelter program, is that just a letter stating they're enrolled in an emergency shelter program,
Yes.
or is that the initial verification of homelessness prior to the shelter entry?
If they are coming, they're moving into permanent housing from the emergency shelter, the document that the emergency shelter provides serves as the third-party verification.
Thank you.
Okay. Rent reasonableness, again, this relates to rent reasonableness and fair market rent. HAP agreement stands for Housing Assistance Plan Agreement, or the Rental Assistance Agreement, kind of the same thing. Need a property tax record showing that the property rented is up to date on paying local property taxes. A housing inspection certificate. Currently, our inspector within the department, Kevin Easter, is doing all housing inspections. I'm not sure that's specifically a requirement. We can ask Colin about that when we get him on a call. It may be that your case managers can do a visual inspection. Lead-based paint screening worksheet is very important because we know the lead-based paint has really significant negative health consequences for children. We still have housing in Durham that was constructed before 1978 that may still have lead-based paint within them, and so it's largely confirming that. Then a copy of the lease, the Durham Housing Prioritization Score, something you'll be getting through your work with Hanalea. And then the initial estimate. This can be a challenge. We talked about only committing to 3 months of assistance at a time, right? So what these lines do is help the administrators of your project look at how many households we think we may be able to serve over the next period of months. And this is an estimate, right? And it's not the kind of thing that you would want to have your case managers share with your clients, except insofar as to say to them, well, we'll provide you as much assistance as needed, and that can be up to 24 months, but we're going to be working with you to make that period of assistance as brief as we can, again, because we have other people that also need help. And so it can be talked about in those general terms, but in no situation should a case manager promise a household that, yeah, we're going to provide you with 12 months of assistance. No, if the household isn't doing their part, after 6 months, the household has not been following through on what the housing plan was, then the case manager can say to them, I'm sorry, it feels like you've chosen to not participate in this project by not doing these things that you said you were going to do. Now, maybe there's good reason for that, and the case manager, could give people another chance. But again, that's part of that trusting relationship, right? To say, we'll work with you, but we need you to do your part. And really, we know from our experience, right, that who are the people who are primarily responsible for their lives? It's the people themselves, right? And what's the saying on your painting in the back behind you?
It says, you've got brains in your head, you've got feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself any direction you choose.
Okay, that's a great saying to share with your clients, right? Because they're the ones who are steering the ship of their lives. And case managers are supporting them, are an ally in that work, but it's the people themselves. And sometimes a good case manager helps people work through a failure. What went wrong? So a household, we talked earlier about, um, having households come back into the program. If that happens, a good place to start a conversation, case management conversation about is, well, what didn't happen the first time around, right? What went wrong? What did you learn from that experience? What would you like to do differently this time? What would you like us to do differently this time? Maybe we can do some things differently. Maybe we can't, right? So, and then the total estimated assistance needed. Again, administrators, people who are leading the program, as you take in the information from the length of assistance needed and the total estimated assistance need, look at your budget on a regular basis, if not monthly, perhaps at least quarterly. Look at, okay, where do we stand in the money that we have available for this project, and based on what we think we're going to be needing to provide support to the current households, do we have an ability, do we have a budget that would allow us to add another one or two households to the project? $284,000, which is, I think, the LGBTQ Center's COC project over the course of a year, can seem like a lot of money, but when you are providing perhaps $20,000 a month in rent assistance to maybe 10 households or 12 households, whatever the case might be, plus the case management costs to pay your staff, the money can go through pretty quickly. So that's the primary, I think, purpose of these lines, household length of time needed in the program, and the total estimated assistance is to kind of help your administrators manage your project budget. And then you need a release of information for the HMIS, and then you need to make sure that you have provided the required policies to the participants, your own organizational grievance policy, and people have concerns so that they know how they can make their concerns known. The COC also has a grievance policy and procedures. VAWA protections, Violence Against Women Act protections are very important in also informing people of their fair housing rights. Very
Excuse
important.
me, Lloyd, may I ask a question
Yes.
about the first page? It says under household total estimated assistance needed, childcare. Do rapid rehousing projects, can they pay for childcare?
Great question. You are leading into the next section. Let me encourage you, and I know we're, let's see, we're in our last half hour. So you guys are right on time with your questions. Trying to get to the right screen. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Do you see my screen? Yes?
Not yet.
Anything yet?
Nope.
Um, How about now?
Yes.
All right. So Anne's question is about what can you spend the money on? And so I want to encourage those of you at the LGBTQ Center should make 24 CFR Part 578 your friend. This is the Homeless Emergency Assistance and Rapid Transition to Housing, the Continuum of Care Program. CFR, you probably know, stands for Code of Federal Regulations. And there is a similar document called 24 CFR Part 576. And in Part 576, I think Anne and Tammy, you especially want to reference 24 CFR 576.104 through 106, which will give you a good overview of what your rapid rehousing project contract, new one that starts, I think, going to start around July 1, can be spent on. And 24 CFR 578.37. I'm going to pull it up now. And this relates, and I think, Casey, you'll remember that we required you to read this in preparation for submitting your COC application. Not intended to be one-time reading. Refer to it whenever you need, whenever you're unsure as to what you can spend things on, all right? Rent assistance obviously is a big piece. Supportive services. May provide supportive services for no longer than 6 months after rental assistance stops. Okay, so I think the ESG program may allow you to provide up to 12 months, but that we need to double check that to be sure. Again, so that's the supportive services is the idea of case management, right? Need to reevaluate annually. And then coming down to whole section on leasing units in this section, as well as supportive services. Supportive services must be necessary to assist program participants obtain and maintain housing. So the case management, again, is really focused on helping people maintain housing once you get them into housing. I think I like the formatted version of this because you can easily search for things. I've not found a comparable formatted version of the of the ESG rule 24 CFR 576. Rapid rehousing projects must require program participants to meet with a case manager not less than once per month, as set forth in 578.37. Unless there's and in 5.37 talks about unless there's an exception because of VAWA. Okay, coming back to your question, Anne, childcare can be provided through COC projects, rapid rehousing projects, including meals and snacks, etc. Again, education services, there's a whole lot of services, employment assistance and job training. Again, this is particularly relevant to the LGBTQ Center. These are all the supportive services that your project can provide to people, right? The questions become, what policies and procedures have you put in place for your project to say to people, how do people demonstrate that they need these services, okay? Legal services, life skills training, etc. Okay, so there's a lot of opportunities to provide supportive services. You need to be clear and treat everybody fairly within the project so that there's some consistency, not necessarily that everybody gets the same services. There needs to be flexibility, but it needs to be done fairly with some kind of a forethought as to how you're going to make it happen, right? Utility deposits, direct provision of services, okay? Operating costs, etc., are talked about here, right? So that's the COC interim rule, 24 CFR 578, excuse me. Not letting me get out of here. All right. So you need me to show you 576.104? You look that up on the HUD Exchange, or even if you just in your Google browser, just in your browser, search for 24 CFR 576. It'll come up and you can do some research. All right. Coming up to the end here, I want to reference as well a document that is on the website, durhamcoc.org. You still see my screen?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. All right. under the policy tab, there are COC standards, and under program standards, there's 4 of them. The last one is standards for rapid rehousing programs. This is our current standards. They're a little out of date, quite honestly, but we are in the process of working to get an update approved. But there are standards within here for rapid rehousing. The basic idea, projects will assist participants in locating and moving into safe, affordable housing. Again, housing navigation, right? Housing identification. Providing housing stabilization and case management services meant to provide long-term sustainability as defined under the program type. The basic benchmarks are here. Quite a few. Take note of them. Download these if you need to. The amount of rent assistance must be reasonable based on household income. This could potentially be 50 to 60%, right? We know that there are, 10,000 or more households in Durham that are paying 50% or more of household income just to maintain housing. So that may not be desirable. It's certainly not the HUD standard, but it can be something that might work. Okay, but also if households don't have any income, obviously, including $0 for households with no income is also an option. Okay, then your policies should spell these out. And this area around prioritization is an area that is out of date. Housing stabilization and case management services, again, are important. Here's more language around housing stabilization and case management services and kind of what the housing plan should be about as you work through with clients, help clients understand the lease agreement. People should know ahead of time what the lease says about having overnight guests, for example, in their apartment, or allowing a visitor to spend a week in their apartment, helping people move, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of that is talked about here, and you need to become familiar with it. You also need to, again, coordinate services. We talked some about that with, in terms of getting people connected to community resources. Okay. Termination should be limited to the most severe cases. Again, when a household has demonstrated that, they think they don't need the case management or they don't need the financial assistance anymore, well, because they're not participating or, they've missed appointments. We understand people's lives can be chaotic, and if people are missing appointments, maybe it's because they don't have transportation, and the case manager, ideally, in a rapid rehousing project, the case manager should either be meeting people in their home or in a community setting. Don't have case managers develop an expectation that the clients are going to come to them. We're providing the services to them. And I think the agreements that you have will allow you to pay transportation costs, limited as they are, for your staff to go to be with people. All right. So I wanted to mention that, and then I want to mention our latest performance benchmarks. You may be aware of these. These were just adopted by our Homeless Services Advisory Committee, our COC board. You see these? Yes?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So we have 4 basic measures for rapid rehousing projects, COC-wide, around housing stability, that 80% will maintain their permanent housing or exit to the permanent housing when they exit the rapid rehousing project. That's pretty low. Our previous benchmark had been 95%. But in the current housing market, that's where we are. And hopefully it'll get better and we can improve it again. But obviously we want to help people maintain housing stability. Increases in total income. We will be looking at how does the project help people maintain, hopefully if they do have income, or increase their total income during the period of receiving rapid rehousing assistance. And we've lowered that benchmark to 80%. Please understand, retaining a income of 0 does not qualify as success on this benchmark, right? Length of time between entry and housing move-in, we've also adjusted this to be 60 days or less. HUD standard is 30 days or less. We recognize that in today's environment, it's particularly challenging for people to find a landlord willing to rent to them, which is one of the reasons we've extended this benchmark. And then lastly, because health insurance and ability to access healthcare is an important determinant of health and housing stability, added a measure looking at what percentage of participants in the project have at least one source of health insurance. And then finally, I think Casey and Natalie and E, you should also be aware of the COC performance evaluation tool, which has additional performance measures associated with it. The LGBTQ Center's new COC funded project will not be evaluated using the evaluation tool until I think 2024. So we do give projects some time to kind of get their feet on the ground and you know, really focus on developing a stable process.
Excuse me, Lloyd, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So the 4 benchmarks that are listed, if we put in the proposal a different percentage, for instance, for one of those, which do we go by?
You will predict with your city contract. The city contract is going to put in the benchmarks that we just reviewed.
Thank you.
With your COC, with a COC project application, you can include the same ones. At this point, we don't recommend putting in more stringent benchmarks than these. The intake process, I realize I have not spoken to that directly, KC. We can continue to work on that. Basically, the intake is the one that is the HMIS intake document that gathers the required information you're going to need from the clients to complete an HMIS, client profile.
Okay, and I have been in touch with Hanalea about scheduling a CE training, and so would that be something to discuss with her, or is that like a document you can just send us that we can go ahead and have, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. We need to coordinate that with with Hanalei. I think her comment at the beginning of our session was that she does want to get something scheduled. And again, since both families moving forward and then LGBTQ Center will both, I think, be starting a new rapid rehousing project around the same time of July 1 or around that time. I think we'll want to do a training together, and we'll also work together a subsequent training set up with Colin. Finally, since we're about out of time, if you have additional questions that I didn't address, threw a lot of stuff at you, I realize that. And
Yeah, so just to
need more
confirm,
clarity.
it sounds like that, Natalie on the administrative side would really just need to be able to meet with Colin. And so that's coming down the pike, I assume. Do I need to follow up with Colin?
Well, we're going to want to do a rent reasonableness and fair market rent training with both organizations. And I will let Colin know that we'd like to get that scheduled as soon as we can. I'm not sure what Colin's schedule is. I would say if you guys have, grateful that worked pretty well to get today's meeting scheduled for both organizations. If you have particular dates between, like, I would say June 15th and June 30th, that would work for you, please feel free to send those dates to Colin and copy me as well. And then in terms of scheduling additionally with Hanalei, I mean, you can perhaps copy all three of us, Hanalei, Colin, and myself, as to what are the dates that would work best for you and people in your organization. And certainly Tammy and Ann, if there are other case managers that are going to be involved, feel free to include them as well. All right. We're out of time. I'm sorry about that. But again, if you have additional questions, and your hand is still raised, do you have a final question that we can address?
No, that was from the last time. I apologize.
No worries. All right. Thanks for your kind attention. I hope I didn't put anybody to sleep with my ramblings, and hope some of this information is helpful to you as you get these new projects going. We're excited and grateful for the partnership that we have with both these fine organizations, and look forward to working with all of you as we continue to help our sisters and brothers in need. All right.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.